see. You got to live with the crooked politician. Trust those things that you can never see. Aye, yeah, yeah, Jacinta. Aye, yeah, yeah. Aye, yeah, yeah, Jacinta. Aye, yeah, yeah. You got to trust your lover when you go away. Keep on believing tomorrow brings a better day. Sometimes you smile while you're crying inside. Just once you turn away while the truth is shining bright. Aye, yeah, yeah, Jacinta. Aye, yeah, yeah. Aye, yeah, yeah, Jacinta. Aye, yeah, yeah. It's a cool, crazy, beautiful world. Every day you wake up, I hope it's under the blue sky. It's a cool, crazy, beautiful world. One day when we wake up, I won't have to see.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very, very warm welcome to the IIG Insights today, the lack of reading and its impact to corporate society. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me such great pleasure of welcoming you all on behalf of the Insurance Institute of Gauteng, as well as the Graduate Institute of Financial Sciences, today's incredible session. Ladies and gentlemen, it does give me such great pleasure of introducing you to the Insurance Institute of Gauteng President, Ms. Simphiwe Mtali. Ladies and gentlemen, I seem to be having a little bit of difficulties resharing my screen. Please may I ask for you just to give me a moment. All right, and there we go. All right, I do apologize for that, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to Simphiwe. Simphiwe, ladies and gentlemen, is the president of the Insurance Institute of Gauteng. And, ladies and gentlemen, she was the first employee at Howden Broking, South Africa. As you can see, her very, very beautiful face here, ladies and gentlemen. Simphiwe is somebody who we really, really love, and someone who we really feel is a part of our industry. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, Simphiwe sees herself as a true product of the caliber of individuals that this industry can produce when education meets opportunity. No matter how small, our incremental contributors all add up. As a new mom, her exercise regime has been placed on pause as she's trying to find her feet balancing motherhood and her career ambitions. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me such great pleasure of inviting the virtual microphone, your IIG president, Simphiwe Mtali. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Christina, for that wonderful welcome. It's really upon reflection when you get introduced by someone else that you actually think, wow, I actually have kind of done a lot in my lifetime. So thank you for that welcome. Today's Insight session is hosted in partnership with the Graduate Institute of Financial Sciences. As mentioned by Christina, our topic today being the lack of reading and its impact to corporate society. With politicians paying 12.5 million for autobiographies, it's actually surprising that South Africa is still considered a nation that doesn't read. Our panelists today will take a deep dive into how improving literacy can positively contribute to the number of individuals entering the workforce and the caliber of individuals within that workforce. As the saying goes, a reader can live 1,000 lives before they die, but those who never read will only ever live one life. I'm really excited for today's session, and I look forward to the conversation. Back to you, Christina.
Fantastic. Thank you so very much for that, Simphiwe. And I think that this is quite an exciting and quite an innovative presentation for today. And it gives me such great pleasure to get kick-started on introducing you to your host and your moderator for today, and that is none other than Dr. Kirshen Pillay, CEO of the Graduate Institute of Financial Sciences. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kirshen has mobilized the power of education to create a better Africa for others to inherit. He was named the TYI Top 100 Young African Innovators of 2018. He's got a National Business Award finalist in 2017, and he was also a finalist in the Entrepreneur of the Year and Young Achiever categories. And ladies and gentlemen, we have been notching up a string of awards and nominations throughout the year of 2023 as well. And Dr. Kirshen Pillay is really such an anchor to the Graduate Institute of Financial Sciences and to the industry as a whole. So without further ado, Dr. Kirshen, I'd like to hand over to you. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Christina. So what we would like to do is, if Christina, you could just turn on to the next slide. Thank you. Imagine for a moment if you could not read. In South Africa today, this is not a figment of our imagination, but rather a stark reality that we all face. Headlines as recent as 7 days ago reveals the literacy crisis that is upon us. What is the root cause of this, we ask? We are quick to blame government, teachers, and the educational system for failing us. But have we ever stopped to self-introspect? What is our part in this? When was the last time we visited a library? We have apps on our phone for eating, for music, for social and professional networking. But do we have apps for reading? When was the last time you read for the fun of it and not because you had to? Let us do a quick introspection exercise. How many emails do you have in your inbox currently? Interesting fact. A recent study has shown that many corporate South Africans have become overwhelmed by their emails, resulting in inefficiencies and poor communication, causing bottlenecks and stagnation to critical decision-making. This has been apportioned to the lack of reading abilities amongst South Africans in corporate today. This is due to, number one, many South African professionals not being able to read with speed. Number two, many corporate South Africans cannot read for understanding. Number three, ultimately, many working professionals find the content of their emails so difficult to understand that they choose to ignore it and not to respond at all in fear of being wrong or feel their colleagues do not make sense. Is it not a compelling argument then that the challenges faced by our children in relation to inadequate literacy levels stems from the home? And this lack of reading finds itself then into the workplace. Is it fair to draw the comparison that very rarely would you find a parent that has a love for reading having a child who does not share that love? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So to help empower us and shed some insight on the literacy issues facing corporate South Africa today, I'm joined by a powerhouse panel of women across various industries representing both the public and private sector. So without further ado, let me introduce you to your Insights panelists for today. Taking the podium today is media maven Joanne Joseph. She has been in our cars and homes for almost 25 years as a news anchor and radio presenter. Not only is she an accomplished broadcaster and a PhD candidate, Joanne is also an award-winning author, with her most recent book, Children of Sugarcane, having won critical acclaim in several countries. Joanne, welcome. We look forward to hearing from you today.
Thank you so much, Kirshen. Lovely to be with you.
Our next panelist is a familiar face to the financial services sector, Ms. Boledi Sima, ABSA's lead people partner. Boledi holds various qualifications, including an MBA. With decades-long experience, Boledi has worked across the human capital value chain in South Africa and across the African continent. Her invaluable knowledge as a human capital expert will be welcome today as we ask her to share some insights as to how reading and the lack thereof shows up in the world of work today. Welcome, Boledi, and thank you for joining us on panel today.
Thank you very much, Kirshen. Good morning, everyone. Looking forward to the discussion today.
Great. Last, but certainly not least, Ms. Nokuthula Musa, the Executive Director for Core Programs at the National Library of South Africa. Nokuthula has more than 2 decades experience as a librarian and has worked in various government departments. She's a member of the Steering Committee for the National Reading Barometer and holds 2 master's degrees in her field of work. Today, we hope to gain insight on this topic from Nokuthula, as well as learn a little bit more about the National Library of South Africa and how we as the financial services sector can leverage their services to better our capabilities. To our IIG community, welcome once again. And as always, we encourage your participation. So please share your thoughts and views with us on the chats, and we will definitely respond to them. So to dive in immediately and sink our teeth into this juicy topic, let's establish firstly, we know that we have a poor reading culture. However, the key is to innovate and keep pace with what the audience want. Shorter, easier to understand information must be produced because people do not have as much free time as before. And there's a lot of other items that is competing for their attention today. So Joanne, I want to start with you. You've presented a book show titled Why Aren't People Reading Today? So my first question to you, Joanne, is why aren't people reading today?
So, Kirshen, I mean, there are a variety of reasons really for it. One of the first is that books are not that accessible to people. In the past, we had a little bit of a better reading culture in the country. Books were in far more circulation. It was more, just fairly effective to walk down to your library, and if your library was well stocked, or if you had a library in the area. And I must be very clear on that, because many of us come from backgrounds and from communities where libraries were not available. But there were still teachers, there were still figures in the community, mentors who encouraged children to read and were able to get them to buy into that idea. Today, we're competing with a whole lot of different things. We're living in the information age. We are competing with social media, which is a huge source of information, some of it useful, some of it not. And it's difficult, it's quite difficult to filter out which aspect of it is useful or not. But the formats are getting shorter. People's attention spans are shrinking. There is the sense that, you know, if I can get information on a story that I'm interested in 2 minutes, why read a newspaper article? If I can get access to information in a truncated form, why read a whole book about it? And so we're starting to find that certainly with children having more access to devices, despite the economic state of our country, the proliferation of smartphones, for example, is quite astonishing in the country. So many children have access to smartphones. They're on YouTube, they are on TikTok, they're on all the major social media sites, Instagram, that are feeding them information in very small quantities. And so we're starting to train their brains and to groom people, even older people, to start consuming information in small bite-sized chunks. And therefore, information and attention span are actually reducing little by little. And I think that applies to all of us. You know, we're so used to switching on and getting a form of information either on the radio or on TV or on online that is far shorter than we're used to. And the question is, well, if you can watch the video, if you can see the pictures, if you can see a couple of people from the area interviewed on a particular story, why do you need to read about it? Reading has become a kind of labor in our society. And I think we have lost the joy that we associated with it. So in our country, sadly, we've got many parents who can't read to their children because they're illiterate themselves and haven't had access to an education. And so the main encouragement for children to read would be happening at school if the facilities are there and if they've got teachers who are encouraging them to do so. You know, on the other hand, for many of us who are more privileged and who've grown up with books in our houses and whose parents have read to us, that's been wonderful. But by the same token, I know of dozens of really wealthy families where reading and buying books is not a thing for the children. They have access, they have the means, they have the time to spend with their children, to read them bedtime stories or to buy them books as gifts. But it's not on the table. You know, there are other things their children are more interested in, and they're more keen on allowing them to pursue other interests than reading. I have a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky that your daughter reads." I think to myself, you know, I don't want to be confrontational, but luck has nothing to do with it. My mom, who was a teacher, started reading to my daughter when she was 3 days old or something. It was really quite ridiculous, actually, but it got my daughter into the habit of finding that books were part of her life on a daily basis. She never navigated a day in her life without a book. And I think that's what it is. It's building the habit of reading. Just like we learn other habits, just like we can convince ourselves after a certain number of weeks to eat a healthy diet or go to gym, reading is a habit that can be developed that way. And if we don't have a habit of reading, it's something that can still be developed.
Fantastic, Joanne. I think you've covered it so well, and I've looked at the chats, and Johan is saying, you know, we have had technology bring the great boon. It could also be the great bane, because that's caused this distraction and this ability to consume information at such a short, speedy pace that we don't even look to curate the information that we have. And I think, to your point, we have to start forming that habit and deliberately creating how we eat, how we gym, how we exercise, is to carve out time for reading, both as parents and as children, because children ultimately do as we do and not as we say. So in keeping with that, Joanne, I want to flow on to the next question. Your work in media is the stuff of legends. What's changed over the last decade or so? Is it a case of people not having enough time to read? Or is it a case of why should they read when they can get news quickly on Twitter or even TikTok? Or perhaps you could also share some insight in terms of the lack of reading and how it shows up in your industry and the information that we then consume as the mass populace.
I mean,
over to you, Jen.
That's a really good question, Kirshen, and I've covered some of that in terms of the shorter formats that we're starting to consume via social media and so forth. But at the same time, you know, it's not good enough to say I didn't have time to read in my day. We've all got the same 24 hours, and it depends on how much of a priority reading is. I think we were speaking to one of our guests earlier who said she doesn't have a lot of time to read, but she makes sure she reads a little bit every day. And that actually is adequate. In the course of a day, one needs to treat reading as a priority. The same priority, give it the same sense of priority that we give to other activities we do during the day. There are certain things we try not to miss. We try not to miss meals. We try, not to miss our hygiene regime. The fact that those are built into our day means we can build certain other things into our day that are of equal importance, and reading is absolutely one of those things. My worry is that we're moving into a time where anti-intellectualism and a lack of love for knowledge is taking seed in our society. I feel that, when you use certain terminology that disparages people who love education or who are purveyors of education and knowledge, you must be very careful, because we're moving into a domain where anti-intellectualism can really take root and become a habit for an entire nation. And reading is something that helps us to resist that. Of course, we've got to be critical in terms of what we read, and what the sources are and where we gain information from. And it's fine to consume a number of sources so long as we are looking at them critically. But I also want to make a comment on the issue of the media and reading in the media. And I'm very ashamed to say that in my industry, we're left with very few readers. So 10 years ago in my industry, you were starting to see this change happen, where thankfully newsrooms were becoming younger and new blood was being infused together with the sort of seasoned workers in the newsroom who had been doing this for a long time and had institutional memory, had covered all the big stories, and could then mentor the young ones, guide them as to what material ought to be read in order to supplement their knowledge and so forth. But in subsequent years, working in a newsroom has become very different. You'll find that some of the people whose critical job is reading do not read. And I hate to say this about colleagues in the industry and about the direction in which our media industry is heading, but I'm deeply concerned about it, because reading is one of the basic functions of our jobs. In order to convey information to the public that is informed, that is critical, that is analytical, we require a real and profound knowledge of the subjects that we deal with. These days, you can switch on to just about any channel, you can listen to many radio stations, you can read many newspapers or online digital sites where the depth is lacking, the substance is lacking. And what that should tell you is that the people involved in that operation are not doing what they're supposed to do. They do not have an in-depth knowledge of the subject matter, and that is why the audience cannot glean the same. And so we have a responsibility to our audiences as media workers to keep reading, to keep analyzing, to keep those memory banks of ours as full of information, useful information as possible, in order to keep supplying and providing our audiences with the depth of information and the level of information and the quality of information that a thriving democracy requires. We're not doing that at the moment, and in many cases, I would put that down to a lack of reading and consuming the right material in order to prepare for broadcasts and the like.
Wow. Joanne, I think what you've just said is not just riveting knowledge, but also very scary. I drill down to two important things that you've said. And you've said very nicely, anti-intellectualism is taking over. And I don't think that many of us are aware of this word and we're calling it what it is. We know something is happening, but I think the way you framed it, that anti-intellectualism is happening. You then go on to talk about the newsroom and how there's a lack of legwork that's being done, fact-checking, critical analysis, and thereby the information that we as ordinary South Africans are consuming is thereby compromised. It could be inaccurate. It could be not giving us the full, well-rounded picture. And for me, that is scary. And what I also want to do is we've just put out a poll saying, do you think that organizations, particularly in the financial services sector, are we doing enough to promote reading as a culture? And 89% of the audience believe that that is not the case, which leads to your point. It's not just the media or journalism where we expect reading to be at the forefront. So, Joanne, with that being said, Mark Clark asked a very nice question. What is the age limit, or is there an age limit to changing the habit and starting to read? What's your take on that?
Mark, that's a good question. I don't think there is an age limit, really. I think sometimes we're limited by circumstances. Books are expensive in this country, and we've got a 30% book tax, which I think we need to start reviewing. But there are also many other sources of information, and there are still libraries. You've got a member on this panel who can talk about the vibrance of some of the libraries that we have in this country. But I also think, I mean, they say a habit takes 3 weeks to bed down. I think that's what the period in question is. And if that's so, it's just a matter of teaching ourselves. It's a matter of using our means of discipline and trying to exercise that discipline to become readers. And we really don't have to start big. We don't have to start with Tolstoy or Dostoevsky, you know. we can really start with short stories. We can start with newspaper articles. We can start with columns or opinion pieces. There are so many interesting things to read. You can start with flash fiction, if you like, which is sometimes 3 lines long, you know, but it's just to start that slow habit and to also find what we love to read. Reading has to give us joy, Kirshen. And sometimes, of course, we have to read for our studies. We have to read for our work. That is compulsory reading. But let's find what gives us joy first. And that's why I try to be really agnostic about what people read in terms of their leisure reading, because that's, I think, where we need to start. Leisure reading gives us escapism. It gives us the means to process history and events in the world that we haven't been personal witnesses to. It gives us the means to understand our history, to build a sense of identity if we're reading South African literature, for example. It serves all of those purposes. So what turns you on as a reader? That's what you have to find. And when you find that genre, even if it's Mills and Boon, yes, I said that, even if it's Mills and Boon, even if it's 50 Shades, I mean, all of those different genres, though we may be critical of some of them and we may categorize types of literature into sort of good literature and not such good literature, they serve a purpose in people's lives. And reading, that's what reading ought to do. It ought to fill that gap in your life, so that instead of when you're sitting in the queue to renew your driver's license or to get a new copy of your ID at Home Affairs, wherever you are, when you're sitting and waiting in the car while your child is in a lesson of some kind, use that time. Don't sit on your phone. Make a conscious choice to have something interesting to read to pass the time. And I'm pretty sure that it'll become a habit in time.
Awesome. And thank you for that. And ladies and gentlemen, you heard it on IIG Insights. Joanne has given a thumbs up for risque reads. On that note, I'd love to bring in Noktula. Noktula, you are at the coalface of reading. What is your opinion on the reading culture in South Africa at the moment? Are you finding the gap between those who read and those who choose not to widening? And if so, why?
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the question and also for the insights from the colleagues that have spoken before me, Joanne. I think we should recruit you to join our sector, the library and information sector.
I'm on board.
Thank you very much. Let me start with the second question, and then I will come to the next question. The first question with regards to the gap between the people who read and the people who do not read. Clearly, the gap is widening. We are seeing the impact of the society that we live in, where people are not reading, and what happens, they end up not finishing school, and they end up not progressing in their careers. But the people that are reading, that read, able to succeed in life. But let's take a step back. I think Joanne also mentioned briefly that we come from different backgrounds. There are people who have never been exposed to reading for pleasure or to reading. And there are people who had difficulties when they were growing up, reading difficulties that were not diagnosed, disabilities. And they went through the schooling system and progressed. And some of them even finished high school. And they reached tertiary institutions. Some of them drop out, they struggle to finish, and some of them find themselves in the workplace. And these are the people, they're not reading, not because of it's their history, their background, but they need to be supported as well so that they can also be brought up to speed to be on par with the others. But those ones that were exposed to reading, especially at a young age, to the importance of reading for pleasure, reading for information, and reading even things like how to guides and by reading magazines. They are used to searching for information and to look for solutions, and they are exposed to different ways of viewing the world, and they can understand their world better, including the place of work, their academic space where they are studying. They can understand it better. Those are the people who become innovative. And these are the people that are here in the audience, most of them, people who have succeeded in their careers, in their lives. They are able to manage even their own personal life, because you can also read on how to manage your finances, how to manage your personal life, how to manage your stress levels, how to manage your own family and your own affairs as a person. So generally, those people are very, very successful. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we can see the gap is widening, and it's getting even wider with all these results that are coming out. On the second question, on the first question now about the culture of reading, Joanne, really, I think she actually explained and outlined it very nicely, what is happening here in South Africa regarding the culture of reading. People prefer to read short text. They are reading on mobile and everything. We know that the reading, which is important, reading for comprehension, reading for meaning, and reading to apply what you have read in your own life, is not we are not doing very well there. That is not it. So we need to take it a notch higher in us and support, especially as the library and the education sector, in ensuring that we build a culture of reading where people are able to read with understanding and for meaning. I just want to take this opportunity to mention that I'm not going to give full details in terms of how we see this, because as I was introduced earlier, we are part of the National Reading Barometer, which we are doing in partnership with Nalibali, Zenex Foundation, NECT, and DG Murray Trust, a national reading survey, which is a follow-up from the South African Book Development Council study, which was conducted last in 2017. We are going to be launching the results on the 13th of June. You will hear more about what we think of the South African reading culture. But as libraries, I think you invited me briefly just to share what we're doing as libraries to promote reading. From the National Library side, we are a national library, but we also have provincial and public libraries which are spread out throughout the country. In general, I just put libraries in general. There's a lot of work that they are doing in promoting reading. We commemorate World Book Day. We commemorate a number of days that are significant in promoting reading and speaking about reading. We have a number of reading programs. Joanne, you said we must start when they are still young. Gauteng Provincial Libraries is running a campaign which is called Born to Read, where they go to clinics where mothers are pregnant and they start talking to them about reading. And we have Free State Library Services. There's a lot of initiatives across the country where people go to clinics, where mothers go for their for their visits before birth, and then they are educated about the importance of reading. And these children, in some, especially in Gauteng, because it's one of the oldest program, they start to track them as they progress and grow, and track how are they doing in school. There is a very close relationship also with the Department of Basic Education when we run our programs, so that there is collaboration, we work together, and because we know as libraries we support education, but education is the one that teaches children how to read. So we put the infrastructure and support to make sure that we support the initiatives of the Department of Basic Education. I don't know if you want me to share more, but I think I'll pause here for now.
Dr. I think thank you very much. I think you've covered it very eloquently, and you've said what needs to be said. And while you were on speak or on stage, we ran a poll to find out where do we think reading starts. And 96% of the audience came back to say that reading starts at home, and it is the fundamentals. And, you know, we as people at home need to encourage this form of reading. And then we have someone like Faith who says, you know, she never thought she would be someone that loves to read, but once she found the genre that she prefers, she can, you know, read that book and delve into it and really enjoy it. So I think one of the important messages is, what is your hobby? If you like fishing, get books on fishing. If you like cars, get books on cars. And that's the first way, because it piques your interest and you'd want to get that information in. However, I want to go to a point that was brought up by Charmaine, and I want to read it verbatim, because I think it's so powerful, because we're saying reading starts at home. We're loving the fact that you'll commemorate Book Day, there's Born to Read, but maybe you can give some insight onto this particular question. Charmaine says, children learn what they live. With books not having been freely available and are costly, it has been difficult. Even now, schooling is not freely available to all, and the books being provided as they still have to buy them and pay high school fees. So that's a very important point to note. What in your frame can people that find themselves in this situation where books are really expensive, and also we can probably tie this back, Noktula, to what's happening with the memberships of libraries. Where are they at this point in time? Should we, as the financial services sector, start having library drives to increase membership, to get parents to go out there and register their children? They get a book, the child gets a book, and we start reintroducing that love for reading through increased library memberships, which are free services available by or made possible by national libraries. Noktula, what's your stance? If you could give me a quick two-liner on that, I'd really appreciate it.
I'll try to give you a two-liner. I've got a lot to say about it. We've just recently held a National Reading Summit where we meet with all sectors in society, because we all know as government, we can't do it all. We need everybody. We need the public sector. We need the NGOs. We need everybody on board. So collaboration is very important. We have a number of NGOs that we work with to collaborate, like such as Nalibali. I've mentioned Nalibali. I'm sure some of you are very familiar with Nalibali stories on radio. Nalibali distributes free reading resources. You've got Book Dash. We are bringing them on board as well, because also libraries have got constraints, budgets to buy books that are freely available. To use a library, it's free. You can access it for free. But libraries, we also know that they are not available in all communities. Some communities are located quite far, so it's quite difficult to access libraries. But we have all these collaborations and partnerships with people who are coming on board to make the reading material freely accessible and freely available. And we're running quite a number of campaigns. This year, our focus will be on early literacy development program around promoting early literacy, especially getting parents involved. Because as we all know in our society, when you go to work in the morning in a taxi, most parents live, especially from informal settlements, they leave very early, they leave their houses early. They don't even see their children to work in our homes. Those of us who are lucky enough to employ some people, they're not able to read for their children. So we need to see how we bring them on board. So I can try to squeeze in here a response like that, but I hope I did try to answer. So in terms of this question now on the screen, in fact, the internet has actually made it even more easier for us has forced us to innovate, especially during COVID. We started to have to focus more on making electronic resources available free of charge for libraries, so that people can still access a library even if they are not able to physically go to a library. It has we have come up with we've modernized library services. Most of our libraries are automated. Even if you go to your deep rural Natal, there is internet. There is internet that is freely available. In some instances, even free Wi-Fi access for people to come with their mobile devices. So we are actually complementing, it's actually boosting our numbers, especially within the young people who are not in school. They come to the libraries to access this free Wi-Fi to download whatever that they need. But the biggest thing that we need to do, because it's an opportunity for us now to promote reading, we need to, as the library, that's where we are lagging a little bit in terms of keeping up with the applications that are available, the artificial intelligence, to bring in that artificial intelligence of pushing books, reading materials based on the interest of people, of what people are searching on the internet, just like they do on Netflix and Google.
Super.
That is where we need to be, but we're still working in trying to put all the skills and cover. We hope that the private sector will also come on board, because we know that they are far ahead in terms of those developments, to assist us as libraries to use this, take advantage of this internet that is available and push reading material content there.
Thank you, Noktula. I think the financial services sector at least has heard you from a private standpoint. So thank you for that. I want to go over to Boledi. And Boledi, I've been waiting to speak to you on this. Boledi, from a human resources perspective, what is the impact of the lack of reading culture having on corporate South Africa, particularly our sector today? Your thoughts, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pillay, for the opportunity to contribute towards this very interesting and important topic. I think on my side, I would actually like to start with a very simple example, which occurs at a recruitment phase, to demonstrate the point that I would like to make. So typically when you enter the corporate world, you are contracted into that world through an employment contract, a very important document to read and understand. But unfortunately, you'll be amazed that a lot of people don't actually read the document, or let me say, they don't read to understand the document and its implications. I think many times people scan the document to confirm their job title, of course, their CTC, bonus prospects, and maybe a few benefits and perks that they're really interested in. And we really go back to read when something goes wrong, pretty much like we do with TNCs or the fine print. And a classic example I have of this in the HR space is that of an executive that resigned thinking that they're actually leaving for better remuneration prospects, only to find out later, when they couldn't even withdraw the resignation, that the new deal that they got was actually worse off because they didn't understand their employment contract and some of the benefits that they actually derived. And that included stuff like share allocations, how some of those benefits translated into monetary value, some of the discounts, staff discounts, and special prices that they are paying on their home loans and car insurance from a banking perspective. And more importantly, there were also a few clauses on bonus payments and terms which they didn't read. And unfortunately, they ended up leaving money on the table because of bad timing, like I said. So this was a really classic case of people, or an individual in this instance, not reading and understanding their terms and conditions of payment, of employment, apologies. And by the time they actually got to the details, it was too late to even do anything about it. And if you think about our ways of work now, in terms of how those have evolved post-COVID, I mean, now we work hybridly, we work virtually. We now more than ever communicate in writing. That's how we allocate tasks to our team in order for those colleagues to perform those tasks. And that actually needs good reading and comprehension skills to be able to understand those written instructions and what's required of them to be able to perform those duties. And what you pick up is that if colleagues have poor reading comprehension, their job suffers, the client suffers, ultimately the team suffers, and I suppose the organization as well. It's as simple as that. And my favorite daily one is the pre-reading that we often send before meetings, right? Because that's often done to ensure that we run meetings efficiently and we make decisions quicker. But what you actually find most of the time is that people, once again, they scan the documents and attend meetings to ask questions that are already answered in the pack. And that is actually quite worrisome because it's become the norm with our ways of work. And to some extent, I actually believe that we have created a culture of winging it, if I can call it that. And the reason I say that is that most of the time those meetings continue and we don't call each other to order. And if you think about it from a board perspective, if I can make an example like that, board members are expected to question, they're expected to interrogate. And as you would know, generally board packs are quite thick and would need a lot of time to prep, which is why they're sent 7 days in advance, right? But generally, again, you find that not all the time you find that people have actually read, engaged the content in advance. And I guess what I'm saying here, Kishan, is that the impact of that is actually very costly because not reading or often leads to poor decision-making. That's costly at an individual level as well as a corporate level. I think that's costly personally because oftentimes you find that you are now stuck in this extended meetings that take longer than they should. That ultimately impacts our well-being, that impacts our family life, and so forth. From a customer perspective, if, for example, our claims consultants cannot fully comprehend a report that has been sent by an electrician post an assessment at a house, that consultant is clearly going to make a wrong decision to either decline or accept a claim. That will be costly to the organization in the form of complaints that would go to the ombudsman or ASTI and so forth. That's also costly in time. That's costly in many other resources that we use in the workplace, the brand, the reputation, and so forth. So yeah.
Sorry, I think with me, and I'm sure many of the audience members are just feverishly shaking their heads in agreement with what you're saying, and they resonate with it in terms of the pre-reading not being done. And what I'm also looking at here is when you're making references at executive level as well. You're making reference to someone at an executive level not reading their contract or understanding their contract better, not doing their pre-reading and what this knock-on effect has. And it's obviously a top-down approach. And, there's that proverbial saying that says the fish rots from the head. And I think as a financial services sector, we often put under pressure to innovate and do more. And sometimes, like one of our colleagues, Vanita, has written, says, ChatGPT gives people information at their fingertips. So what's the need to read? If I had to put in on my, for a presentation, for example, lack of reading, give me a presentation. ChatGPT does that for you. So maybe sometimes we're over innovating and we're not going down to the basics of learn to read, do the legwork, do the hard work, etc. And I think that's what you're bringing up here is so important and so valuable. I'm looking at it. We've got 10 minutes in. I've got so many more questions to ask you and the rest of the panel, but I'm just going to quickly go down and try to ask this question. One of the most common observations, Buledi, in the HR field is that it's difficult to find candidates that match the caliber of what the organization expects. And this is for various reasons. Key among them is that candidates aren't displaying the knowledge that shows that they are on top of trends and expertise in their areas of work. Due to this, they are sometimes missing opportunities that aren't expanding their horizons and keeping them up to date with trends in the industry. So what do you advise for these people or these individuals within our industry who haven't been reading and haven't been keeping themselves abreast? What should they be doing?
Thanks, Kishan, for that. I think most importantly, like everything else, number one, it starts with awareness, right? Awareness that there is a problem in that we don't read. So that's very important. Number two, I would say it also goes to the point that you made earlier around actually making sure that we maintain the standards. Because like I said, if people don't read, if people don't prepare, if we encourage this culture of winging it or accept it, ultimately the system collapses. And I would say it's very important for the corporate world and individuals to not accept that. If I were to make a classic example of that or a simple example of that, going back to my days when I was doing my MBA, we had lots of case studies to prepare, right? If you had not read the case in our class, we knew that you were either asked to leave the class, go prepare and come back so that we can engage meaningfully. However, what we tend to do these days is to accept it and move along, and I think that tends to communicate that it's acceptable to wing it. And so it gets perpetuated. And secondly, I also think that from a recruitment perspective, what we can do is to actually identify jobs and roles that require strong reading comprehension skills, assess those individuals for reading comprehension before putting them in those roles to ensure that from a customer service perspective, we don't suffer and so forth. So there's quite a bit that can be done. But I think it's entrenched in the system in that the response is in changing this culture that we have of winging it, as I've said it, to encouraging the one of reading and actually recognizing and rewarding individuals that do read.
Buledi, I think you've summed it up better. And I think the takeaway for us all on call today is to remember and remind ourselves, it starts with us. Let us acknowledge that we are now going to stop that winging it culture. If we find a winger or whatever we want to call it, a person winging it in the boardroom, in day-to-day work, let's call them on that. Let's have zero tolerance to it. And as you said, in terms of your MBA studies, what that has posed. We are really drilling down to the final 6 minutes. And they say time flies when you're having fun. And I do believe we're having fun here today because it's such an interesting thought-provoking topic. Joanne, I just want to ask you this, and I have to ask you this question. We've heard you during high-profile interviews, which you have conducted. Back to today's topic, Joanne. Some of the responses in those interviews, surely it's true there is a lack of reading. The lack of reading is impacting South Africa from the responses that you have received. Joanne, if you could just shed some light on that.
So that's where the pre-interview comes in and has become so important, more important than before in recent years, Kirshen. Because, you know, in previous years, you could kind of depend on an interviewee to give you a really substantial picture of the story that you're looking at. Not so anymore. You've got to pre-interview them. Your producer has to do it because you don't know what you're going to get anymore. And with the rise of ChatGPT, which has come up a couple of times, you've brought it up and it's come up in the questions again. The regular use of ChatGPT is going to mean one thing. It's going to mean that people never develop the skill set. So they never acquire the knowledge themselves, and they never exercise the skill set of taking that knowledge and structuring it into a comprehensive and cohesive answer. And so this is going to become a greater challenge for journalists as time wears on. If I, with your permission, may I just reflect on some of the brilliant things that Nokuthula and Boledi also had to say?
Please.
Because I'm so taken with many things that they brought up in their aspect of the interview. One of them spoke about, Nokuthula, I think you spoke about reading time in school. And this is a huge thing. And I think corporates actually need to think about this too, especially if you've got these enormous packs that you've got to get through. And there's a lot of knowledge, information about the company or about the climate and the area in which you're working. There has to be some perhaps a deliberate intervention in order to create a time when people are allocated that reading time to be able to get through it. Because perhaps the reading is not being treated as a priority because they have other deadlines that have got to be met. So perhaps we need to start thinking about working time into the corporate day as it should be worked into the school day in order to create a period where children are reading regularly as part of their education. And then I think as well, if I may appeal to corporates, I think there's wonderful work being done by the libraries, but there's a lot to be said for children owning books, and it apparently changes their attitudes to reading. So if we could try and get more books into the hands of children, let's make it fun. Let's make it competitive. We've already got these mechanisms like the Pendulani quiz, the lit quiz that exist that are not available to all children right now. Let's look at focusing not just on books in English, because we do need English as a global language. Probably also need Mandarin as well, but in time. But we do require books in indigenous languages and the availability of those books to children to inculcate that love for it in them. And let's not trash technology altogether. We can make it work for us. Electronic readers are extremely useful. There are library apps like Libby that mean you don't have to leave your home if you're not able to get hold of a book. So I think we should definitely make use of those. Audiobooks are wonderful. Some people are better learners when they listen to audio rather than read. So let's make use of that as well. And let's start a reading culture in companies that goes beyond just their reading material from their field. Why don't we have more book clubs at companies? Make it a little bit more social, fun for people, downtime, where they can have a glass of wine after a day's work and reflect on an interesting book. Just some ideas to throw out there, Kirshen.
Beautifully said, Joanne, and thank you for that. And also, there's a correlation between ChatGPT equaling anti-intellectualism. And I think if we had more time, we could go on and on and on. And our polls have come out and saying that 98% of the audience have had a shift in their thinking and realizing how important education is. Nokuthula, with the time bar on us, I just want to ask, do you have any key takeaways for our audience, anything that you would like to share with them as your parting word?
Thank you very much. All I would like to say, I think Joanne has really summed up what I also wanted to say towards the end. Let's read for our children. Let's give books as gifts to our families, not even in your immediate family, to your extended family, your relatives. And the book clubs in the workplace, please, let's have those book clubs in the workplace. And can corporate please support the reading and literacy initiatives in the country as part of your social responsibility. I think in the short time, that's all I can say. Please support financially and with your skills and expertise, support the work of the literacy organizations in promoting the culture of reading in South Africa. Thank you.
Noktula, thank you so much for that. And in keeping with what you are saying, so ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of today's session. Today's message is that you wield the power for change, and always remember, an educated nation is an empowered nation, and it only takes you to start making that difference. In the chat box is a link for you to purchase copies of Joanne's latest book, Children of Sugarcane, at a discounted rate exclusively for those in attendance today. This is to enforce our commitment as a sector to improving the literacy levels. Also, if you want to learn more about the National Library of South Africa, please view their website, which is also put into the chat box. Remember Madiba's words, education is the most powerful weapon you can use to change the world. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, we have a gift to make a difference in your life and promoting reading. Gifts is giving away 10 books, Children of Sugarcane, and to grab your free copy, all you need to do is post your thoughts on today's session on either Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, tagging the IIG and gifts with the hashtag committed to building a better Africa for others to inherit, hashtag break the mold, hashtag yes to reading, hashtag children of sugarcane. And the most thought-provoking, most creative, and most liked post will receive their free copy of Children of Sugarcane. Hashtag share, hashtag like. A special thank you to our panelists, Joanne Joseph, Noktula Musa, and Boledi Sima. Your insights have been invaluable. To the IIG and its president, Mr. Sipiwe Mchali, thank you for encouraging such dialogue. And most importantly, to you, our audience, you have been fantastic as always. Thank you for being a part of a conversation that matters. Hashtag goodbye. And please look out for how you can claim your CPD certificate and access the CPD vault via an SMS, via a message that's going to be put onto the chat. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time.
You're a good soldier, choosing your battle. Pick yourself up and dust yourself off and back in the saddle. You're on the front line, everyone's watching. You know it's serious, we're getting closer, this isn't over. The pressure's on, you feel it, but you got it all, believe it. When you fall, get up, oh, oh, and if you fall, get up, eh, tamina, mina, sangalewa, cause this is Africa. Tamina, mina, waka, waka, tamina, mina, sangalewa, this time for Africa. Listen to your God, this is our motto. Your time to shine, don't wait in line, y vamos por todo. People are raising their expectations. Go on and feed them, this is your moment, no hesitation. Today's your day, I feel it. You pave the way, believe it. If you get down, get up, oh, oh. When you get down, get up, eh, tamina, mina, sangalewa. This time for Africa. Tamina, mina, waka, waka, tamina, mina, sangalewa. Anawa, tamina, mina, waka, waka, tamina, mina, sangalewa. so solemn, journey, biggie, mama, from east to west. Party, waka, my waka, my This is Africa. Samina, waka, Samina, sakalewa, anawa, Samina, waka, Samina, sakalewa. This time for Africa, Tango, Tango, Samina, sakalewa, anawa, Tango, Tango, Samina, sakalewa, anawa. This time for Africa. This time for Africa. We're all Africa. We're all Africa.